So I wrote this, and I brought a piece of paper up so that I wouldn't forget it, because I think it actually captures everything. I think all of us here know that commitment won't get the job done in terms of really driving and achieving the diverse numbers that we want at all levels of the organization. And we know that in the end, the real goal is to reflect the world's population at all levels of our organizations. But to achieve that, there also needs to be a fierce and deliberate focus on creating a culture of opportunity. I think we've talked a long time about culture of inclusion, but it's about, at this point in time, a culture of opportunity, which requires a completely different set of approaches, tools, and discussion about what needs to change in our organizations. So Julius is a really interesting guy. He's loitering over here behind this sign. Julius Dunn is our moderator.
Do you have levels?
And I have to
I will
the beginning of
that
his
so
bio, which
I
I
have
think
to
is
stop
so
recording.
interesting. And that's why I'm carrying my glasses. So hold on a second. Oh my God. So since 2008, Julius Dunn has been on a mission to help diversify and develop the talent for the sustainability of the advertising industry. Okay, that's huge. And I think the really interesting thing about Julius's background, and you can read it yourself, is that he's had already a very successful career in the industry and decided, based on the importance of making progress on this issue, that it was time to step aside, really devote his own personal energy, and really try to drive some change. So I think he and the panel, who he's going to introduce, are going to give you some great discussions today. Enjoy the day, and thank you so much.
I am so happy to see all of you here today. And the number of people who signed up for this session has far exceeded what Kat and her team expected. So round of applause to all of you. So I took some notes. I hope you guys don't mind me reading. I just want to make sure I hit all my points. But my name is Julius Dunn. And as she said prior to, I'm a millennial advocate, talent recruitment strategist, and proud father, who, after 8 years of service in this very demanding industry, decided to take a step back, take a hiatus to address the needs of my 12-year-old daughter. So when Kat asked me to do this, I felt it important as a man, and more importantly, a black man, working in the capacity of HR, talent, and inclusion, to show I exist, and I support the cause wholeheartedly. So I hope my presence today is a demonstration that all lives matter. Not just the ones that you guys take care of in and outside of your agency walls, but those that we affect day to day with the messages that we shape to our clients. So, round of applause for you all for coming today. So aside from the other hats that I've worn and wear, today I will be your moderator. And for the next hour, we will discuss new practices that are enabling agencies and brands to attract and retain, specifically, women, minorities, millennials, and moms for the panel titled Raising the Bar. This is the first year that Kat and her team have created defined tracks for attendees to immerse themselves in topics that concern the majority of your C-suite level executives. So each of you are in store for a full day with access to some of the industry's best and brightest, not just on the stage, but amongst you. So look to your left and right, behind you and in front. And be sure to connect with them, exchange Snapchat names, exchange contact information, whatever it is that you want to use to continue the conversation long after today's discussion. This panel is a part of the HR track, and one of many discussions offered in part by Bank of America, so thank you. I would like to pause again to ask that we recognize their contribution as a client to help provide a platform for us to discuss topics concerning our talent and the most valuable asset we have in this industry, which is our people. So round of applause for Bank of America. So, raising the bar. And meeting the expectations of our people is an absolute business imperative, especially when you consider the title and focus of this panel, which calls attention to 4 crucial segments of our talent pipeline. Now, depending on your outlook, the title could also imply that the bar we're raising is a little lower than we would expect it to be right And judging from today's attendance for this event, and more specifically this track, I think most of you can agree there's work to be done, and there will always be need for these conversations, regardless of whether you see the glass half empty or half full. It's no secret we're all here because of the word most often used to describe it, crisis. People most often refer to what's going on right now in our industry as a talent crisis. And while it's true that finding great talent is an ongoing challenge for most agencies, we should be quick to embrace the word. We should be so quick to embrace the word crisis more than we should embrace the word innovation. Today's talent is looking for more than just a paycheck, and each of you are sitting on huge reserves of talent, most of which have the ability to do amazing work if given clear goals and defined paths that outline the opportunities that they have set forth. In a recent study, most recently delivered by the Center of Talent Innovation, the Misunderstood Millennial, Sylvia Hewlett and her team draw attention to the fact that 99% of HR talent professionals believe millennials are a flighty bunch with one foot out the door. However, only 9% of millennials are flight risk. The other 91%, not so much. And primarily that's because they have a lack of financial privilege. So if you take into consideration a lot of the things that they had when they came into the workforce, you know, cost of college rising, debt that I can't even discuss right now, it would make a whole lot of sense if you just take a step and change your perspective. This segment of our talent pool, which currently makes up more than half of our workforce, have been reduced to stereotypes like aimless, although 71% say achieving goals is an important aspect of meaning and purpose. They've been reduced to other stereotypes like fame seekers, although 68% say making their families proud is an important aspect of recognition. And know-it-alls, although 64% of them cite learning from people that have more expertise than them is an important aspect of reward and recognition. So in my opinion, those stats point to our need to invest in training and more development opportunities like this so that they can foster crucial relationships for growth in and outside of the agency. Although I cited stats about millennials, the truth is what's good for millennials is good for everyone. And that statement couldn't be more true than amongst those disproportionately represented in our industry. For example, women, especially moms, those of which are represented today, and people of color are individually buoyed among senior and executive ranks in our industry, which to many of you is not a surprise. And those lucky enough to represent all three of those categories are affectionately known as unicorns because they don't exist on our industry center stage, and allegedly they don't exist behind the scenes either. Most chuckle at the use of that term, which is essentially a mythical creature that doesn't exist. But these stats are no laughing matter, and we should be more sensitive to the message that sends to those we hope to retain and more or less those we hope to attract. So yeah, I see how most would consider this a crisis. However, I see it more as an opportunity to reinvent ourselves just as we did in the creative revolution. Pairing an art director and a copywriter was unheard of at the time, and was surely not the best kind of practice in the 1950s. However, those who had the courage to embrace change are and will forever be cited as innovators. And the time is now for all of us to relive that legacy. So with that said, I would like to introduce 4 very dynamic and well-accomplished women, all of which lend a very interesting perspective on this topic, starting with Sedef Onai. So outside of the hat that she wears at our agency, Sedef is the Chief Talent Officer with 72 and Sunny, but she also is an equal parts global citizen, lifelong learner, and connector and grower of people. Welcome. Next we have to the stage Patty Clark. Patty is a Chief Talent Officer with Havas Group and Global Chief Talent Officer at Havas Creative. She is also a talent innovator, constant traveler, and mother of 2 boys and 3 strong. Next up we have Liz Gill. director with the Carmel Lynch, but she's also a brand strategist, creative hype lady, unapologetic Kanye fan, and most importantly, Tommy's mom. So welcome. Last but certainly not least, we have Carrie Keenan. Now, Carrie is the co-founder of Half Irish, and she'll share more about that. But she is also the chief creative officer, proud mentor, and brand and entertainment enthusiast, and a fierce mom. So, welcome all. I'm going to take a step down to get more comfortable. Okay. So today is going to be a very, very, very casual conversation. Considering the fact that all of you have packed the room out, this is a very important topic. We will definitely make sure to keep time for you all to ask questions and exchange ideas and back and forth dialogue. But we do want to, outside of giving context to the issue and the topic, allow for our panelists to kind of set the stage for the conversation moving forward. So, having said that, I will pose the first question to Carrie.
Oh, coincidence.
Absolutely. So, you have a very interesting background.
Yeah.
Extremely interesting. I'll let you go into it more, but some of the things I learned about you sound very similar to those stereotypes and things that people have used to define millennials. So, you were an entrepreneur at the time. You were a chief creative officer. You come in and out of, business, and I wouldn't say come in and out because you've been maintaining both the entire time while being a mom.
Right.
25 years in.
Well, yes. Yes.
Yes.
So I wasn't a mom for 25 years. Yes.
I would like to ask the question, what is it that you use to persevere, if you will, 25 years of the business at a time where the topic of policy change and work-life balance was not necessarily such a hot topic in our country?
Oh, that's a great question. So, it's easier for me to talk about the way things were than I think how I persevered, because I guess that's sort of more just like one foot in front of the other, and what choice do we have but to persevere. So, I'm really glad that we're here talking about this, and we've had some pre-conversations, which shouldn't be a surprise, hopefully. But and I was super glad to hear about, which you will hear about, some of the things that particular agencies are doing to make this more of a policy conversation versus just an admiring the problem conversation. Which, when I was coming up in the business, we didn't even admire the problem. So I remember that when I decided, my story is a bit different because my children are adopted. So I have two children, one's 11 and one's 9. And when I was with my husband we decided on an adoption plan. I remember going to my boss at the time. I'm going to try to keep names and agencies out of this conversation. And he was super excited for me, and I said, here's the thing, I don't know if it's going to be in 2 weeks or in a year, because that's kind of how it works. You just apply, and then you kind of wait. And he couldn't have been happier for me, and he was lovely. And he said, go speak to HR and see what the policy is on adoption maternity leave. So I went and I spoke to HR, and there was no policy, and there was no maternity leave at all. So even though my children were adopted from birth, both times I was told you get no maternity leave, so you can only use your vacation days, basically. So I know why that is, which might be way too in the weeds, but it has to do with short-term disability, and there are all these reasons that agencies don't really want you to go on maternity leave because they don't get paid back unless you're on short-term disability, and you can look into that. It's a little depressing. But since I wasn't giving birth, my they could not file an insurance claim against me for short-term disability, so I got no maternity leave. Except I did get maternity leave because my boss, who happens to now run one of the most successful independent agencies in the world, wrote a letter to a very large holding company saying that he couldn't be more disappointed in their decision, and they came around and told me privately that they would give me 6 weeks maternity leave, just don't tell anybody. Yes, and I'm not very good at keeping secrets. So I tell that story because I feel like for me, because there was no policy back then, my success was a mixture of luck and right time, right place, and these really certain individuals who just stood up for me. Similar story with my second daughter, who was a little less of a big deal, but I just had the creative manager at the agency I was working at basically just said, just stay home and send me your timesheets. Like, we won't tell anybody. And that time I didn't tell anybody. Right, but you know where that was. So anyway, to me it's like it was isolated incidents, and this is super important because this has to become a policy conversation. And the other thing that, as I was thinking about all this, that I realized was that as I was coming up in the industry, I can't think of a whole lot of other women who are around my age, who started when I did, who are still in it. So that is another very, I think, important thing to recognize and discuss. And then this Elephant on Madison survey came out, and of course I flipped right to the mom section because I think that's where I relate, honestly, the most right now. And the numbers were really, I think, terrible, staggering. 49% still feel that they are negatively impacted by motherhood. That's a terrible number, 49%. That's like the motherhood penalty in full effect. And 39% are mothers, period. So, are choosing that path. Now, it's a choice, so not everybody's going to choose it, but that seems low to me. So I still think those things are happening. Women they're dropping from the workforce, and they're still being penalized for being moms, and that's why I think we need to change policy. How's that? Okay.
Let's go director. Yes. And you, as a millennial, new to the industry, I think something like 10 years in, right? Has been a mom since the very beginning, which is very interesting. People don't think you exist. You do. She's right there. I would like to know two things. One, how have you felt inheriting an industry similar to that was just described? And two, what do you feel would help you stay another 10 years in the business moving forward?
I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I don't know that I was like, yeah, that's a great question, and I'm like, oh God, how am I going to answer that question? For me, I've seen a lot of positive change being a mother in the industry, and I'm really grateful to work for places and have worked for places that really do support me as a mother. What I'd like to see change is a little bit more transparency from leadership as a whole in agencies. There was a really interesting article in the Harvard Business Review earlier this year about how vague feedback is holding women back. And if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. It was really looking at performance reviews and how vague the opportunities for improvement were for women versus men had very specific input on what they can do to improve. And that's something that I think hit home for me, not even just from a performance review perspective, but just transparency in general. What do I need to do to move up and advance? I'm very ambitious. A lot of the millennials I know are maybe overly ambitious in many ways, but that's a great thing. And it only helps us to know the truth about why we weren't given an opportunity and what we can do to get those opportunities. And so I think that support needs to be not just for parents. Obviously there are things that need to be done to really support mothers and fathers in this industry, but I also think as women, a little bit more clarity is what is going to help people really reach that next level. So not just investing money to make it easier for mothers to work in the industry, but investing time and energy in them to help them grow. I don't think people are flocking to advertising as a career in maybe the way that they used to, and so creating those cultures of growth is what's going to make people and women and people of color and minorities especially really want to stick around for the next 10 years.
It's a Great point, transparency. It's definitely one that I would say most HR and talent professionals are a little on the fence on how transparent they want to be.
But it's hard, right? You don't want to hurt people's feelings, but you need to help them grow, and that honesty and that truth is really a gift for people. So be generous with that gift and tell them why maybe they're not at a certain place yet, but that helps them understand what they need to do to get there and grow.
Absolutely, great point. So, Sadef. Having heard now,
There's one more on the stage. Sorry.
very casual conversation.
Delaying tactics.
So Sadef, after having heard Carrie's explanation and story of how she's kind of persevered the last 25 years, Liz having said what will keep her in the industry for another 10, hopefully 20, we'll see. And then hearing things like transparency being one of the topics that they would love as a part of the conversation as it relates to feedback. How do you take those type of ideas and build courage to then address policy change and get the buy-in from the C-suite for most of those changes?
Where do I start? The feedback one is a really interesting one, actually, because as a culture at 72 and Sunny, we are a culture of feedback. Whether you're a man or a woman or whatever level you are, because it's a performance-based culture, so you have to know how you're doing in order to, and what to do to get to the next level. So I think from that perspective, and that is I think in millennial behavior is I need to know, I need to have feedback so I know, because they're very growth oriented. So I think from that perspective, that's very much ingrained into our culture. And that creates a level of transparency, because you do have to know and how to give feedback as well, which is something that we really coach and train our leaders on. So with that, the spirit of transparency, I guess, when we are working on the key issues, when we're looking at how we are doing with our policies or benefits, we tend to talk about what are the things that are a priority for the company leadership. And last year when we looked at the number of, and every year I look at the numbers, and I look at the numbers of parents increasing by 30%, about to increase by 30%. And the number of women who are about to become mothers tripled from within 2 quarters. That was really a moment for us to say, we're going to look at this. We are a relatively young company, and didn't have, so had a smaller population, and as the population is growing, of course, the company is evolving, our people are evolving, so we have to evolve with it. And that became a priority for us to look at our parent policy. Especially the number of mothers was a huge increase. The approach we took there was, let's take a moment and talk to the people who were parents and came back, who became parents, came back, and how their experience was, and let's talk to the people who are about to become parents and understand what's on their minds, what's the excitement, what's the anxiety, how can we help. My one advice, I think every company might hear slightly different things. I think it really is important to take that moment and look internally and talk to people, look also externally and benchmark yourself and see how you as a company are doing. We looked at our industry, we also looked at, because our industry isn't well known, the benchmark there wasn't very high. So we're like, where do we look to and see what some companies that we admire, modern and progressive companies, are doing. And so after taking those steps, so these are all considered steps, and people we were talking to knew why we were talking to them. So we weren't in any way, don't tell anyone that we're talking to you. Actually, our COO and myself did the conversations together. And we said it's being done in the spirit of us understanding what's happening and how can we get better. That went a long way. It was incredibly, the conversations were really eye-opening, emotional, and just having the conversation itself went such a long way. And we also got a lot of insights from people who used to work at other places and how, this was done. And to your point, more hush-hush, you don't want to talk about policy change because it is a big undertaking to change of policy. So as a result of all that, we looked at it and decided this is parent policy change is a big change. We are going to look at both primary caregivers and secondary caregivers. Obviously, primary caregivers is a bigger issue. It's mostly women, and retaining senior women is an issue in our business. So that's where we wanted to, as a first step, wanted to hit hard and see what we can do. So we did change our policy. We upped our primary care leave to 24 weeks, six months. I did the math right? I always confuse it, and that's above and beyond, job protection and pay. And we also heard from both parents, both primary and secondary caregivers, but especially from moms, the ramp down and ramp up were really difficult because they're just so in the business and so dedicated that last month where your due date is approaching and you have appointments and you have you need to learn how to be a parent, and leaving for those appointments made them feel like I'm letting my team down. And we, both Evan and I were like, oh, whoa, that's huge insight. We've got to make sure that this is actually not something that you're asking for permission. We have to make sure that that's written in, that you, especially in that last month, you need to start making adjustments to your life. And then coming back in is the same. It is a big adjustment, and childcare and nanny and all that kind of stuff. So you need that. So we put those into our policy as well for both parents. Which the feedback we're getting is really good. Our back from maternity rate is 100% right now, which is good. Hopefully we'll retain all of them. So that was, and we also signed on to Pledge Parent Leave, which if you guys don't know it, please Google it and look them up. They are an organization that was created for the creative industry to start really committing to giving meaningful parent leave to people, to their employees. So it's really great. And it calls for transparency. So you have to publish your policy openly in order to become part of it. We're proud partners and pledgers, and we want to keep supporting them. And as we improve and learn and do more, we're just going to publish those things too, and keep sharing the knowledge and how we got there.
That is, first of all, a round of applause for the fact that you were able to. All right, Patty. So, Havas is a huge global network, and I heard from Sadef, a lot of what she said is listening to people, right? In order to implement the change that would resonate with the ones that you hope to attract, and most definitely the ones that you hope to retain. So my question to you, on a larger scale, right? When implementing programs after you've listened to the people, please tell me how you go about doing that, but take into consideration all the other components of an inclusive or diversity and inclusion strategy.
Sure. So I think first of all, the whole maternity, motherhood, parenting is a little more complex when you're dealing with a big global network where the rules of the game are different in every country. France happens to be fairly generous in terms of their leave and whatnot. So I basically said I'm not going to set out on a mission to try and get something that can be common across the system, because that is going to just be super complex and you kind of will probably stop in your tracks before you can even get going. So on the whole, maternity, motherhood, etc., my main focus right now is on the U.S., where obviously there's great opportunity. And as we look at that, we look at it in terms of, I like to think of it as chapters. So there's the whole expecting stage, which has a lot of complexity to it for people in terms of determining how much time they're going to have off, how long they're going to be paid, et cetera, everything that everybody's mentioned. There's then the onboarding when they come back. And then there's the continued development of that individual when they return. So I think if you disaggregate it, it actually helps because it's not just one issue, it's kind of a journey for the individual, for the leader. In terms of our other programs, we really tried to take into consideration when we're developing talent programs the different needs that people have. So we have a mobility program called LOFTS, and when we were developing that, it's actually an opportunity for an employee to go and live in another country, work at another village of ours, be matched up with a peer coach, have learning objectives, and has just so many developmental benefits. And we were very clear when we designed it, everyone was kind of like leaning in, wanting it to just be a millennial program. And I was like, no, this should be something that anyone that's a high performer, a highly skilled individual can participate in because there's great developmental and learning opportunity for them. So it's been really interesting as we actually have our 5th class of LOFTS going on right now, and we've had people who are 50 years old participate in it. We've had mothers, fathers, and because the design of it is tight, it's like a 4-week pretty intense learning experience, people can manage it with their life. They're able to kind of figure it out. We had one young father who had just had a baby, and he brought his wife along and the baby along. I think he was going from London to New York. Because of the types of accommodations we give them for their stay in the other country, people are able to flex and are able to be part of it. So, I think it's really important to consider the whole life somebody has and how, when you're developing the talent programs, everyone's enabled to participate in it, that it's not just for the young people who don't have maybe the family commitment or even could be an aging parent commitment that other folks have. It's not just children, but to make it available and access to everyone. And it's been quite successful in terms of a very diverse population of people participating in it.
That's key, and I'm glad that you spoke about the mobility program, because oftentimes you have HR and talent professionals who will get excited about an idea and they go, oh, I want to take this back to my agency, but they don't take into consideration how it ladders back into the inclusion strategy. Hopefully they have one. And they were really passionate about the issue related to policy change, because as they were looking at their careers, which I had to commend them on doing, they're like, at some point I'm probably gonna give birth to children. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And they were like, well, how do we go about doing this when every time we look up, there are conversations around a lack of accommodations made for you give, or what would you say to your former self, strategizing for the long haul and working in this industry? We'll start with Liz.
I would probably tell myself to get ready. This is going to be challenging. I spent a lot of nights and weekends away from a very young child when I was first working in this industry, and thank God for a very supportive husband who could accommodate that. Some of the hardest things for me when I was first starting out was hearing comments from a supervisor that he would say, you didn't work hard enough. I'm like, well, last I looked, I clocked 100+ hours, so can you tell me more about that? And his intentions were good. He wanted to tell me that he wanted me to be more of a leader and step up and take more responsibility, and that's great feedback. But my interpretation was, you didn't spend enough time away from your family. And so looking back now, some of the things that I heard when I was first starting out in the business was, well, you can work for a really great agency doing really great work and kiss your family goodbye, or you can work for a mediocre agency and have work-life balance. And that can't be the only choice that women and men have to make. That's not fair. There has to be a better option than that. So that's what I would tell myself. It's like, don't settle for that. That's bullshit. I found an agency where I can have both.
And everybody needs to support that, not just the people that have children at home. Everybody needs to support that, and not just for people that have children. I think everybody deserves to take a break. We can't expect groundbreaking creative work from people who are constantly burning in the midnight oil. So support that for parents, but support that for everybody. If somebody wants to leave, to take some time away and go play a kickball game, let them go play kickball. It will be good in the long term.
Kickball has always helped me.
I love kickball. Karaoke? Let them go do karaoke.
To kind of answer that question directly, I would say this. My children are in college now, so they're 22 and 19. But from the time they were 6 and 9, I was a single parent, and I was in a C-level job with extraordinary, pressure and whatnot. And I think that it was a bit of need in terms of having to push forward, and I truly believe that women can do it. And men can do it as well in terms of being phenomenal fathers. And my passion coming into this industry is to try and help us do a better job around everything we do across the talent spectrum, whether it be working mothers or a young millennial who has dreams and aspirations and wants to kind of go about it in a different way. So that's where I would channel my energy now. I get up every day thinking about how I can make a difference, how I can make a bigger impact, and it's not always easy. There's a lot of days where you kind of go, oh, this is tough. But it's possible, and I'm a big believer of testing and learning. Do those small micro actions that everybody at the 3% conference talks about, and test and learn with a small population and get a little momentum and then scale it and move it forward. And I think that's the way we're going to see change happen. If everybody can do a little bit of something, then it starts to create a difference in terms of how things exist. And I do think there's a lot, it's not just programs, there's a lot of environmental stuff that has to happen as well in terms of helping leaders understand their role in it and making sure that they're playing the supportive leader role in terms of helping people, because everybody's situation is different. There's not one kind of spread you can put across it all. You really have to understand people's individual situations in order to support them and help grow them as a leader.
I was thinking about the question. So the question is, what was my former self?
What would you, yes, if you had to prepare a mentee for what he or she is going to face in this industry,
Right.
What would you say?
I would say don't take anything at face value. I think now more than ever, I feel like there's a lot of openness for progress in a lot of areas because we kind of have to. And we talk about the war for talent. I find it that it actually pushes us to be better. And if I'm mentoring someone, I would say when you're trying to make key decisions of where you want to be or your life stage or where you're going to grow your career, don't just look at, right now there's a lot of talk, our industry, you can't have family. We're changing that, be part of the change. And right now asking the right questions, again, this is I think a millennial behavior that we've all been living with for a while, is kind of asking and challenging the status quo. I think the more conversation about that, the better it is. And companies who are open to it and know that they can't exist if they're not evolving it. More and more people are aware of that. So ask and also come to the table with ideas and solutions. I think recently we got a question of, do I have to wait until I'm a creative director to start a family? And I don't want to. And actually, ECD of our New York office is here, and I think he heard this question. I'm like, no, you shouldn't have to. It's your life, and you should be able to start your next stage of your life whenever you want to and need to. So all of us are taking steps to make sure that, and also this is not just a parenthood question. This is at any time, for any life event question. So, sorry, to summarize, don't take things at face value right now. Things are going to get better if more of us are talking about it and more of us are putting ideas on the table to
should go out and fight for pay parity right now. Vote, because as long as there is an inequality in how we're paid, there will be an inequality in who stays in the workforce and who doesn't in terms of parenthood. Mothers tend to stay home, women, excuse me, tend to stay home because they get paid less. It's that simple. And that's a generalization, but it's a correct, I think, proven generalization. So, I would say fight now for pay parity. I would say find a mentor because it means everything. So, just a very quick story. When I was a youngish, I was a creative director already, actually. I was working with a woman who was a phenomenal account director, and she's now gone on to become a big deal. And she had children early-ish, one of the first working moms that I knew in our business. And she would leave the office at 5:30, and I was always like, wait, where are you going? And I would try to follow her out the door, and I said, you can't leave, it's 5:30, and I said, where are you going? She's like, I gotta go home for my kids. And I was like, it made no sense to me whatsoever how she was managing this. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, she's managing that, And the whole world was not falling apart, and she was doing an amazing job. And I could call her when she got home if I needed to. So I think that you need to sort of find the people who show you the way. And even though she didn't do it intentionally, she showed me the way, that it was all going to be okay, and I could set my own boundaries and be my own style of mom, and this world that I felt was so dependent on me being there, or putting in the 100 hours or whatever, wasn't really real. It wasn't real. So, and the last thing I would say to everybody is that I feel like our mindset has to change. It just does. One thing I find is that, and it's getting so much better, but moms don't seem to be out and proud, they kind of hide sometimes the fact that they're moms, and maybe that's changing, but if we are more out and proud, then we will be more, you will find more mentors easily, and I think it will really start to shift everything. So, brag about your kids, I am such an oversharer, it's like, man. And I think it makes people see that I'm superhuman, and not superhuman, human, really human. And I have my own problems, therefore they can have problems too, and they will be solved. So to your point, it's like everybody has their own story, everybody has their own stuff. So we can kind of make it work together.
Great points, everyone. I guess I'll answer the question too. A couple things to take into consideration. I know that 3% is somewhat and has always been a bit of an idea incubator. And given the fact that the team at 3% has really kind of dedicated a track to HR talent, to me says a ton. But I also recognize that our industry does a really poor job in taking a step back and kind of analyzing what the objective is instead of getting really excited about doing these programs because everyone else is doing it. So some of the things I would say is, one, if you guys don't already have a diversity and inclusion strategy, please develop one and ladder some of the initiatives that you guys are implementing back to that so that it creates and fills a larger objective other than just doing a cool program. And it takes into consideration all of the different stories and all of the different types of talent that you guys are going out trying to attract. The other thing I would like to say is take into consideration that there are some stories that aren't told. We hear a lot about moms. We hear very little about single dads. I myself am one. And that story is one that has never really been told. We don't hear much about millennials who have the obligation, or if you will, the responsibility of aging parents, possibly as only children. So then who has to take the responsibility of that? And the stories go on and on and on and on. So I think some of the key points that I heard is listen. I heard transparency is good, from that of the talent to the HR, the talent professional who is trying to implement this change. And don't be afraid. I know that the issue is extremely complicated, and speaking from those who I've talked to on the talent side, who are the recipients, if you will, of most of the change that you guys are trying to drive. They don't understand how complicated it is. Mobility program sounds cool. Everybody in this room knows how complicated that can be to implement. But at the end of the day, do not let that discourage you from creating these opportunities for growth for those within your industry or within your agency.